So Amanda really needs no introduction, but I am going to read you one because Amanda is a social entrepreneur. She's a civil rights activist, and she is the founder of she's the founder and CEO of RISE. She drafted the Sexual Assault Survivors Rights Act, which passed unanimously through Congress. She also helped spark the movement against violence toward Asian Americans. And in 2024, Blue Origin actually announced that she will become the first Vietnamese woman to fly into space. Yes! Oh my gosh. Okay, so give it up for Gia Vang and Amanda Nguyen. Hello, everyone. That was so nice of Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Obviously, we have the wonderful, amazing Amanda Nguyen here. This is the second time I'm actually talking to Amanda, and every time I talk to you, I'm always like, oh gosh, how do I describe her? You have done so much in your life already that it is really hard to describe you in a couple sentences, but I'm going to try to do it. So, Amanda Nguyen, 2022 Time Woman of the Year, 2019 Nobel Peace Prize nominee, an astronaut, the first, as Michelle said, Vietnamese American woman astronaut. She's going to be going into space this year. A survivor who has changed laws both in this country and worldwide. And now you are an author, and her new memoir, Saving Five, is out now. Oh my gosh, please welcome Amanda Nguyen.
Thanks, y'all. Wow, I feel like I just came home. Like, this is so great. Thank you for your energy.
Main character energy from everyone out here today. Yeah, we do have a lot to get to, Amanda, because there's so much that you've done in your life that I know a lot of people here want to know about. So first, I wanted to dive into your memoir. It's called Saving Five. It's happening now. It is out. Tell me a little bit about what that memoir, how would you describe it to people? I've read it, actually. I read it in a day and a half. If you want to read it, this is a beautiful, I called it a beautifully disturbing, awful read, but it was amazing.
Wow, thank you.
How would you describe it to people?
Wow, well, first of all, it really feels like my heart is outside of my chest in thousands of copies. You know, stories have the ability to create empathy, and so I did write it for people who look like me, and there's so many in this room. And so my hope is that you'll find yourself in these pages, that your stories are reflected in some way. Saving Five is in two parts. So I wrote it in a traditional sense. The first storyline is from my assault to how I passed my first law, and it details how the steps of passing a law is. So if you're interested in that, then that's for you. And then the second part of the story is actually written in surrealism. So I go into my memory and I meet past versions of myself, the 5-year-old, 15-year-old, and 22-year-old. And the 5-year-old gets sick, and so we have to save Five, which is why the book is called Saving Five. And in order to save Five, our inner child, we have to go through the different realms of grief. Each realm has a lesson for us, and if we're able to pass that test, we advance all the way into acceptance.
And so I heard some people, actually, when we were out here, they were saying, why is it called Saving Five? And so I was able to explain to them what it was, but it was beautifully, creatively written, too, in that way. Tell me a little bit about going back to some of these memories of your assaults. Well, how difficult was that, or was it that you had moved past that from the hurt place that you were?
Well, I'll tell you what my therapist said. She said to me when I said, I'm writing a story about hope, and hopefully this will give people a roadmap to healing. She said, Amanda, that's so wonderful that you're writing about a journey you haven't taken yet. So, savage.
I like your therapist.
I know, me too. On that note, though, I will say that mental health, of course, is still a topic that so many communities, including mine, grapple with. And somebody once said to me, I wish I had like a management consultant for my personal life. And I was like, that's what a therapist is. So I really do love mine.
Okay, so in Saving Five, you kind of go through the motions of, like, as you mentioned, passing these bills. These bills, the difficulty of getting just seen by a lawmaker and then having to really play the politics literally. Talk a little bit about the challenges of doing something like that, both on the US congressional level and then worldwide at the UN level.
Yeah, those are very different playing grounds. The United States law, the federal law, took about 6 months to pass. I mean, on average, it takes 10 to 15 years because it takes multiple legislative cycles. We did pass it in 6 months, which is incredible, but it took 6 years to pass at the United Nations, and that's because on the global level, not every place is a democracy. Civil society isn't seen in the same way. But what I will say is that the same cadence of how we as activists were met by politicians repeated itself. So whether it was on the state level, the federal level, the international level, often there was this sense of, I won't take you seriously unless you spill your guts, unless you are a public face to this trauma. And I understand that, in sociology, there's this effect called the Mother Teresa effect, right? Like when you are able to put a story to an issue, it stays with people longer than just numbers. So I realized that early on, but I made the choice to be a public survivor. And the reason and this is before Me Too, so it's still stigmatic now, it was definitely stigmatic then. The reason I chose to do that is because, honestly, I was so mad. I was so mad at the system that I decided to put aside my astronaut dreams, put aside my Harvard degree, and explode, And if that bill could speak, it would probably scream, a blood-curdling scream. But now, after 90, 91, 92 laws, it's more like a chorus of justice. And what I realized is that anger can fuel. It is absolutely propellant, but after a while, it runs out. And what's left is hope, and that is what sustains movements.
I want to dig into that a little bit more because I imagine some people out here, so many stories, and they are looking for the courage within themselves to say, okay, I want to publicly speak about this. I want to, take a stand for myself. How do you navigate that? How did you navigate that?
Yeah, and actually for this audience, I will share something that I get a lot from at least students who share my identity as an Asian American. When I speak at colleges, many of them come up and say, hey, my parents want me to be a doctor or a lawyer or engineer. And so how did your parents react to you dropping your Harvard degree to become an activist? And the truth is they hated it, but after I was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize, they came around. So,
they were like, okay.
What I want to say is get nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. That will solve your problems. No, what I want to say is that your passions matter. I know that a lot of parents are not going to like me saying this, but live your life as you want to, because I know at this point in my life that I have seen my friends who, because of filial piety, because of reverence, which is absolutely respectable, choose something that they don't want, and they suffer for it. And that suffering compounds. And so if you want to be an artist and that's your calling, then I truly wish for you the courage to live your life truly as you want it to be. And trust me, your parents, one day, when you get nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize, will come around and be like, okay, now doctor, after, but it's okay, because you will be happy.
I love that. I love that. Okay, so you talked a little bit about your parents, which you do talk about your parents in the book and your family too, but you also talked about your mom's experience, which I found really an amazing life to read about her as well. You traced her boat refugee, journey. Tell me about her journey and tell me why you did that last year.
Yeah, when astronauts fly, we have a zero-G indicator, and I will have two. It's a little something that floats once we hit the Kármán line and tells us we're in space. Well, actually, I'll have three. My hair is definitely going to float. And I'm growing out long because I know that for so many folks in my community, hair means a lot, and I do want to show that we belong in the stars. But the first note that I have is a promise that I made to myself. After I left the hospital, after my rape kit, I wrote down, never, never, never give up. And I tore it from my journal and I taped it to my laptop. I looked at it every day as I was trying to graduate. I looked at it when I was fighting for my rights in the United States Congress, and I will be looking at that note over Earth. And for me, it will be a full circle moment of healing, one that I hope will symbolize to other survivors that there is so much more ahead for you, that even if you may feel like it is so tough right now, you don't know how it's going to get better, know that you can one day heal, get your justice, and honor the person you were before you were hurt. Yeah. The second zero-G indicator for your question is shells from my mother's refugee island. We came on boats, and now we're on spaceships. But I really do I wanted to understand where I came from. I wanted to understand intergenerational trauma, what happens when the patina of war isn't gone, when it isn't processed, what it does to the legacy of those who are living in its shadow. You know, this year is the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War, or as they call it, the American War. And for me, I was actually way more nervous about Vietnam, finding out that I was going to be the first Vietnamese woman, than I am about flying to space. And it's because, like so many folks who grow up here, I'll just speak about my experience, you know, are we ever enough? Are we American enough? Are we Vietnamese enough? Is my language good enough? Am I speaking well enough in this or that? And I'm so grateful that Vietnam embraced me. So on my flight, I'll actually be performing an experiment in partnership with the Vietnamese National Space Center. And it's my hope that science is a tool for peace and reconciliation.
It is truly amazing, and I just think it's wonderful to be sitting up here with you, Amanda, as a child of refugees as well, who my father fought in the secret war, which was alongside the Vietnam War. Yeah. But you talk about 50 years since the fall of Saigon, and then you also mentioned to me it's 30 years since reconciliation, so that's why it's so important for you to bring those shells and work with science as a tool to bring these communities together, and I love that.
Thank you. I'm actually doing a second experiment, so yes, in my limited time in space. So the second one is on women's health. It's on menstruation. So I am flying in the world's first all-female crew, and in the beginning, NASA barred women from becoming astronauts citing menstruation, and they didn't have the data to back that up. So I will be collecting data to refute that. A little justice in science.
Wow. Okay, I just want to rewind too, because you are on this space flight, it's the first all-female flight ever to go into space. Isn't that incredible?
It's about time.
So let's talk about how you then did all the things you did, and then now we're moving on to what you wanted for your own future. Tell me about the moment that you decided, okay, it's time. I've done what I can do for survivors, and I want to move into my dream of becoming an astronaut.
Yeah, you know, I feel like an accidental activist because I really didn't know that's where my life was headed. It was because I was so mad when I found out that the government was going to destroy my evidence and that they were routinely destroying rape evidence all across the United States, untested. I felt that that was so unfair, and I learned that there is a terminology for this called secondary re-traumatization. You know, the conviction rate for rape is 1%. So that's every 100 rapes that are reported, only one conviction. And I remember being told that by legal professionals who were very well-intentioned. They said, hey, you know, we just want you to know the reality of what it would look like to go forward in this Kafkaesque legal system. And that it takes 2 to 3 years on average for cases, and that while you're doing it, it can be all-consuming. So given these choices and finding out that my evidence could be destroyed, I felt that I had a choice. I could accept this injustice or rewrite the law, and one of these things is a lot better than the other, so I rewrote it. And yeah.
Yes.
And so can you, that's the thing. Actually, our team has just passed our 100th law over 10 years. And when I say that, it's not me, you know, it's our organizers. And so I do have immense hope every day I wake up, because truly, when we break down the process of creating change, it can seem like this Leviathan, but it really is about the small incremental steps we take to engage in our democracy. You know, most people think that democracy has limited tools. So there's voting, running for office, or marching. But there's actually another one, and that's writing your own law. Be at the drafting table, because if you're not, you're what's on the menu.
And so you did rewrite the laws. You said something in your memoir which I found really poignant for so many people here too. I know that you became the public face for survivors with all the laws that you drafted, or bills that you drafted that now became law. But tell me a little bit about why you decided not to put your name with this particular law.
Yeah,
A lot of people do that, right? We hear all the
Yes.
laws of someone's name because it happened to them, but you were given a choice.
Yes, I was given the choice by the United States Senate to name this Survivor Bill of Rights law Amanda's Law, and I turned that down because I knew that the Mother Teresa effect is a double-edged sword. You know, for so many people, activists who do have laws named after them, the law then becomes synonymous with their personhood. And I wanted these rights to exist beyond me. I think for me, a successful social movement exists beyond the catalysts that have propelled it. And I also believe that if folks could just take the tenets of this bill and run with it and spread it, even if it is not credited back to me, that is success. And that has happened. We actually have a term for it at RISE, which is called a Theory of Hope bill. So there are plenty of legislators who look towards the federal bill as a model bill, have taken it and have passed it. And perhaps, you know, their politics would not align exactly with mine. But because it's not attached to my name, to my personhood, they can take it and they can run with it. And that is how we have passed laws that impact now 1.3 billion survivors across the world.
So political. That's the arena, right?
It is. It is. I think activism is screaming with strategy. So.
Yeah. Also, one of the things I found really interesting in this book, because there are so many community organizers in this room right now, people who work for different orgs, different nonprofits. But one of the things that I found fascinating as someone who also runs a nonprofit was you mentioning trying to pass these bills and coming up against other groups that said, get off our turf, we're doing this. What is your advice to folks here in this room listening right now who maybe work in nonprofits and are trying to do similar things as someone else?
Yeah, I feel like folks in the nonprofit world may really relate to this part where, it is seen as a zero-sum game, right? Especially in the world of philanthropy, where capital is somewhat pitched as fixed. So to those, I want to say there's actually a lot of money out there, and just to keep pushing for your vision. Yes, of course, the field is saturated with many nonprofits who have been there for a long time, who have been there for a short time. But if you know what it is that you're fighting for, you have a clarion call for your mission, that is the thing that should be up front, and I wouldn't let anybody else deter you. You know, it was, of course, really painful to feel like, you know, the call is coming from inside the house, right? Like I had hoped that so just to give context, when I started my fight, the first place that I went to was to other nonprofits to say, hey, like, you know, could we work together or help me to write this bill? But I understand that nonprofits really do have limited bandwidths, you know, and so that's why I decided to take the fight and do, you know, my own journey. But I really do think that for folks who are fighting their own journey, you know, their own path, just know what it is you want to accomplish and go for it.
Okay. I want to get back to my question like 2 or 3 questions ago where I said, when did you know you were ready to move on from this? From helping survivors, and when did you say, okay, I've done what I can do? When did you know?
When I changed the world.
Period.
No, but like actually after the United Nations General Assembly voted on it, I, you know, watched each country come up to that dais and speak about survivors. That was the whole goal, which was the United Nations General Assembly had never had a standalone resolution for rape. It was always a subcategory of gender-based violence, but of course the crime in itself has unique criminal justice implications to it. So it was a profound moment that I never knew when I started this journey would lead there. But after that, I found that I had kept my promise to survivors. Because the way that it worked was I found out that the government could destroy my rape kit, and then I spoke up about it, and then people wrote to me saying, you know, that's also happening to me. So then I delayed my astronaut dreams in order to write the federal law and fight for that. That passed, and when President Obama signed it, over 1 million people reached out saying, hey, you know, I'm also fighting for this in my own country. Why don't we try to do this on the international level? And very naively at that time, I was like, oh, well, I passed a US law in 6 months. Like, it'll be another 6 months. Maybe like a little decimal needs a change over there. It was 6 years.
Right.
But, you know, I felt like, I don't know if anyone's ever seen the movie Mad Max Furiosa, but there's a scene in there where it's kind of a spoiler, but that movie's been out for a while, so.
So that's on you guys if you guys have seen it. Okay, go ahead.
Where she is so sad and she screams, but it's just silent. And I really felt like a curse was breaking when the United Nations voted unanimously on this. You know, the book doesn't go into the details of the UN law, which is in the next book, but
teaser.
But, that's right. But it really felt like justice to me, you know, and I really hope that that's a justice that all survivors get to feel, because justice is defined individually by everyone. You know, one of my friends, she wrote her story. Chanel Miller, Know My Name, and her perpetrator only got 3 months, you know, and so the hurt and what we have to deal with lasts much longer than 3 months, you know, so is there justice in the criminal justice system? But I will say that for me, being able to make sure that no one had to go through what I had to go through is the closest, is how I define it. And in that moment, when I arrived there, I wanted to honor the person that I was before I was hurt, and her dreams were to go to space, so I'm leaving Earth.
You are leaving Earth, in fact, this year. I love that you said a curse was breaking. That curse is breaking, but along the way, I want to say this was another really, I'm not giving a ton of details about the book, but one of the things I loved was mentorship in your book, because you had some really incredible mentors at NASA, and you wrote about one of your mentors. Can you tell us a little bit about him and talk to this community, this crowd, about mentorship and how important that was for your own journey?
Yeah, absolutely. You're referencing Leland Melvin, who was an NFL player before he became an astronaut, so still all the dreams. Leland was one of the mentors I met at NASA, and when I was making my decision to leave my astronaut path in order to become an activist, I consulted him. Said, hey, this is what happened, this is what I'm trying to do. And Leland told me about his mentor, Katherine Johnson. So Katherine...
Have you heard of Katherine Johnson?
Yeah, I feel like I'm the grandbaby mentor of Katherine. So Katherine's story was featured predominantly in Hidden Figures, and she was a human calculator for the Apollo program. And it also talked about how she, as a Black woman, had to struggle with her civil rights being denied in a moment where she was also the person who got people to the moon. And he told me civil rights and space go hand in hand. And he also shared with me something that was private then and is now public, which is that he himself is a survivor. And he said to me, go fight for our rights, and when you're ready, space will be there. Space will be there long after you're gone. And I will be here for you. So when I got the call that I was selected for this crew, he was my first phone call.
Yeah, that really made me teary-eyed reading that part. And I think because as a child of refugees too, I often think people ask me a lot about mentorship, and I'm happy to mentor anyone if they're interested in journalism or I guess nonprofit world too. Michelle and I are. But when people ask me about, how did you know what you were going to do, and I just don't feel like I know anyone, and my parents were not able to step in those moments, and it wasn't their fault, but people like Leland, people like all of my mentors were able to step in those moments.
Yeah. I will also say that all of our organizers at RISE, one of the first assignments that they get in our curriculum is called Cringe Mountain. So
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm gonna totally relate to this right now.
Totally. It's rejection therapy.
Yeah.
So what we do is we ask our organizers to engage in telling people, telling strangers, telling folks who might not agree with them about what they're fighting for. And that's because, well, let me just describe what Cringe Mountain is. Anyone who has ever been successful has had to climb Cringe Mountain, which is this slope where you declare that this is your ambition, these are your dreams, and then people will then tell you you're being cringy. But eventually, you will keep going on, and you will make it. And those same people will say, oh, how did you do it? And so I wish for everyone a happy Cringe Mountain journey, because I promise you that on the other side of it, first of all, nobody who has gone through it or is bigger than you will tell you that you're cringy, because they've gone through it too. It's only people who are smaller than you or feel threatened who will tell you that your ambitions are cringy. So happy Cringe Mountain climbing.
Who has climbed Cringe Mountain and feel like they're on the other side of the mountain now? Who is climbing Cringe Mountain right now? Yes. We're here for you. We're here for you. I love that. Okay, so you're going up to space this year, as we mentioned, on this historic flight. There is just this kismet thing happening where you have talked about, when your ancestors, the folks who left Vietnam, went on boats, they used the stars to navigate. Tell me about why you got interested in the cosmos and how you're gonna really bring this back to who you are today.
Yeah, it's on the all-female crew, so I'm leaving all men behind. No, I'm just kidding, we love men. Actually, I did. So the book Saving Five is a love letter to women, but I wrote a specific chapter as a love letter to the men in my life who were there for me. And it examines all the ways in which men can be allies. You know, after I left the hospital, I talk about my hero, and all the names are changed, so I have to like remember they're like synonyms. So Alex. So Alex is the person I wrote about because he was the person I called to help me do laundry. And in that moment, you know, in movies, heroes, you know, they big action, you save, dramatic. But for me, it was just somebody being present. And Alex himself had gone through something really traumatic. He was in a gang, and he had survived a drive-by shooting. And I reached out to him because I knew that he would understand trauma in that moment. There are so many other men that I wrote about in that chapter and how they were able to be there for me. And so I truly do believe that anyone of all genders can engage in this book, because my hope is that whether it's because you're a survivor, or you know someone and you love someone who's a survivor, or you yourself are on a healing journey for whatever issue it is, that you will find solace in these pages.
Okay, so limited copies of Saving Five here in this museum. It's at the bookstore, you gotta go get it. Because at 2 o'clock, Amanda's doing some book signings up on the second floor in the corner right here. So you can talk to Amanda then, get to know her a little bit more, and she will sign a copy of Saving Five. I want to leave the crowd with something that maybe they can take home today. So I know today's theme with Asian Women Are Strong is main character energy. And you have been displaying main character energy, I feel like, Amanda, this whole time. But I want you to talk about what main character energy means to you, and maybe what people can take home with them as they go about their lives.
Yeah, it's being Delulu.
I think it's just a little crazy. It's okay.
Yeah. Delulu is the Salulu. No. I will say, or I'll have a real story. The first time that I talked about my rights, my story, it was horrible. You know, it was the first time I was sharing my trauma. It was many hours. Politicians just straight up were like, this is not gonna help me get reelected. I sympathize, but like, sorry. I was like, wow, honesty, brutal. But I went home and I cried because I was like, this is awful. I just need someone to tell me that they love me. And the next morning, as a pathological optimist, I went back to the United States Senate. And in my Uber ride, I met a driver who was kind of intimidating. He didn't really talk to me. But at the end of the ride, he saw I was going to the Senate, so he asked me why, and I told him. And this once intimidating man started crying, just tears streaming down his face, and he said, my daughter was also raped. And what you went through, she also went through too. And when the car stopped, he said, can I shake your hand? Thank you so much for fighting for my daughter. Has anyone told you that they love you today? I love you. And I'll never forget that, Dad. So what I want to say is that you are absolutely the main character in your life. And sometimes when we feel powerless and small, know that your actions really do matter, that your voice is so powerful, and that no one is powerless when we come together, and no one is invisible when we demand to be seen.
Amanda, what can you tell us about your space flight? When can people watch?
It's very soon, I'll just say that.
Okay, very soon. What will you be thinking about when you're up in space looking down on Earth?
I will be thinking of her, the person that I was before I was hurt. And I hope that in that moment, it can show anyone that if you've had a dream that's been deferred or life got in the way, just know that your dreams absolutely matter. People will only take your childhood dreams as seriously as you take them. And so I did climb Cringe Mountain for a very long time when I was like, I'm going to space, and I had no idea how. Actually, a month before Blue Origin told me that I was selected, I just felt like I had no pathway to space. And And when they told me, it took me some time to process because I didn't even know that was what that Zoom call was about. So they're like, do you want to think about this? I was like, yeah. What did you just ask me? But I will be thinking of my community and also the ability that we all have within us to achieve whatever it is that we set our minds to.
Amanda Nguyen, everyone. Astronaut Amanda Nguyen.